Hi, everyone. Welcome to another podcast from Cybersecurity Magazine. Today with me is Alvaro Garrido, Chief Information Security Officer at Standard Chartered. Today we will be discussing cybersecurity within the financial industry, exploring topics such as the evolving cyber threat landscape, the role as a CISO, regulatory compliance, leveraging technology for defense, and more. Hi, Alvaro. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, Anna. Very glad to be here. Thanks.
So can you share a bit about yourself and your journey in the cybersecurity field? How did your career start?
Sure. Well, I've spent all my entire career in technology. I have a master's degree in telecommunication engineering. Spent a little bit of time in some microsystems where I, forced myself as a technology professional. My career is not necessarily the typical CISO career. I've been running different roles in increasingly more senior in different companies. I came to run technology in this same bank a few years ago. And after that, I became a CIO. I ended up in security a bit laterally, and I think there is almost an indication of how the role of CISO is changing. I think the challenges these days, and that's why I moved into security, are very much related to stakeholder management, dealing with regulators, dealing with very complex environments, managing complex remediation projects. So I think those skills are also very, very fungible. And the fact that I was doing a CIO role eventually served me very well to move into security. And I've been here in the space for the last, about 7 years, first in BBVA as the Chief Security Officer, also in charge of fraud and cybersecurity and physical security, and now here in Standard Chartered in my second stint as Group Chief Information Security Officer.
So you mentioned you had various roles, but as a Chief Information Security Officer, what does security and the CISO role mean to you, especially in the context of the financial industry?
It's a very 360 role. I remember a couple of years back, I posted something on LinkedIn that created a bit of a stir, because normally people tend to think that, the CISO role is very much about, being a hoodie and then typing and then fighting the hackers. And there is also that, right? But it's more and more about what I said before. And also, to me, it touches on all these different points about senior stakeholder management, kind of defining the strategic connection and alignment between technology and the business. I think in a way, it's got that element of excitement as well. It keeps you down to earth with technology. So it's a very super interesting role. And that is what keeps me attracted to that. So at some point in my life, I had, to make the choice of going back to a CIO track or to stay in security. And I chose the latter because that is what it means to me. It keeps me excited and there's never a boring day.
Mm-hmm. So talking about cybersecurity more, how have cyber threats in the financial industry evolved in recent years, and what trends do you foresee in the near future?
Well, I think if you look at it, remember just having a discussion just a few years back, that in the past, being a CISO was about protecting, the data, almost as a digital representation of a financial asset, in a bank. And life was good, and life was happy. And pretty much things actually went head to head. Of course, we had the bad guys trying to get these digital assets from the bank. And we, on the other side, trying to mitigate the inherent gaps of unsafe protocol, like it was IP. And then things changed dramatically. And then Europe first, and then the rest of the regions came up with GDPR and all the data protection regulations. And then it became a double game. It was not just about protecting financial assets. It was about protecting identities. And then the whole game changed, because that combined with the almost infinite distribution of your technology footprint, it became a very centralized business technology hot topic. How can you respond to that situation where it's almost like a very asymmetric situation? The bad guys, all they have to do is to find one vector of attack in a particular time that they choose, whereas you on the other side need to protect this kind of very more complex and distributed asset base. At the same time, the tooling and the toolkit that both sides are using, some of these very sophisticated actors, in a way, very fast to adopt and incorporate new technologies to their modus operandi and to their TTPs, their tools, techniques, and procedures of attack. AI, generative AI, we're already starting to see that, and the patterns that we are observing on the internet and an attack surface clearly indicate that they're being done by very sophisticated algorithms. So we need to respond to that as well. I think as well what we're seeing is the sophistication of the business model. Now, the actors are starting to be very specialized. The guys that actually identify your vulnerabilities, the actors that actually facilitate the malware, then the actors that actually provide the botnet. So in itself, the sophistication of the technology they're using, but also the sophistication of the business model behind this industry. But at the end of the day, likewise, we're also very fast in adapting and understanding this technology and these patterns. We have a very fluid and very variable geometry of our approach to cybersecurity. I think the key for that is to make sure you build agility and you're able to respond to those new challenges in a very fast way, both from a technology, people perspective as well, trying to abstract yourself from very good solutions and then operate more at the abstract level of very kind of vanilla analytics, which is giving you that agility to respond. And I think the other thing we're seeing is, particularly if you operate in a bank like ours, where we have a large footprint in many different parts of the world, and we need to respond to the regulatory requirements. It is true that there tends to be an alignment in the requirements from these regulators, but it is almost like increasingly more sophisticated regulatory framework that we need to respond to. I think the bottom line at the end of the day for us is we try to do the best we can, and we absolutely respond to. We take almost like a maximum common denominator for our most stringent regulatory requirement in a particular geography, and then we deploy laterally to all the countries. I believe, and we can talk about that later, that all in all, I think this regulatory framework in the end is good for us and good for the industry. Maybe the other element that we often talk about is and what is changing is finding those more specialized talent is becoming increasingly a problem. I think long are gone the times where you threw volume of people at the problem and looking at the screens. Now the requirements, I think we are in the second or third generation of talent needs. So we're training for our people for that.
So we were talking about regulations and regulatory aspects. Could you elaborate on the different regulations that the organizations need to be aware of and comply with?
I think there is a geographical element that, as I said before, there is more and more, I think, some harmonization. We look at the privacy regulations as well, and this privacy sits a little bit between the chief data officer role and the CISO role, so we're both collaborating very closely there. Very often the controls are applied by us, and we respond to that. So privacy, very, very important. Everything about jurisdictions and where the data goes from and where to. Lately as well, there is very, very clear regulation about reporting, incident reporting, and your obligations to disclose and responsible disclosure. There has been changes lately, both in the US and in Europe, so we need to comply to that. What happens when something happens? There's regulations lately even about ransomware. It was a bit of an unclear space as to how to behave and how you operate in case there is a ransomware attack against your bank, and whether or not you are able or not able or want to engage with the actors, with the bad guys. So that regulation is also starting to be more clear. And as I said, to me, I really welcome it. I think it's forcing all of us to be sharper, more harmonized. I think the average level of the security posture and preparedness for the financial industry is getting dramatically higher year by year. Anecdotally, the complexity of these regulations is so high and so diverse that we're starting to apply, even LLM models to understanding that. So we scan the different sources where some new regulatory requirements or legislation or directives may come from. And then we try to produce and elaborate dedicated focus reports that we can distribute to our different units to make sure we respond to them in an intelligent way.
So you mentioned ransomware attacks, but could you discuss the potential impact of these cyber attacks on financial institutions, both in terms of financial losses, but also reputational damage?
Normally, so to give an example, the way we look at risk in the bank, we look at a particular asset or set of assets for a particular business line. Take, for instance, trade or cash management or financial markets or wealth management. So what we do is we analyze a particular service that we provide. Then we filter that kind of asset against the macro ecosystem and what are the current threats, how that maps against different, up to 100 and almost 118 different attack scenarios. And then we match all that against a particular set of controls. Now, what that is giving me is what is the risk of loss of data, loss of service, or loss of funds for a particular group or service line. But on top of that, we also have the loss of reputation. And what I'm seeing more and more, you mentioned ransomware. I think last year is a year in record where more ransomware money was obtained. I think it went all the way up to $1 billion. And what is happening is we're seeing more and more this double dip extortion. So where the bad guys really are looking two ways to get your money. The first one is about encrypting your data and then your ability to recover and then bring the systems back to life. The other one, which is becoming more and more, I think the concern is exfiltration of, or the publication of that exfiltrated data. And I'm seeing a shift from the former to the latter, because as you deploy your defense in-depth architecture with more layers of control, it might become increasingly more difficult for the actors to eventually get to your crown jewel or your asset and encrypt the data and make it unusable. Whereas they're starting to move more in the direction of exfiltration of data and then making it a reputational problem for you. Actually, there have been cases last year where they even called the regulator to tell them that they were ransomware in use, so you were actually forced and got more pressure to pay and to come to terms with them.
So what role does cybersecurity awareness training play in strengthening overall resilience of financial institutions against cyber threats?
I think, listen, for many years we were going through training. As initially was more of a self-serving, optional. We were also having a very vanilla approach and very basic approach about, do not do this with your passwords, do not write them down. But the level of sophistication of the macro environment is such, and the regulatory requirements are such, that we are substantially elevating our approach to this, both in terms of how do we segment our user base. So if you're a normal employee just doing some maybe back office work, not very close to a particular set of data, then you will get the vanilla training, and everybody does that, and everybody has to do that. But if you are actually maybe a software developer and you have the ability of dealing with the systems or tampering with the systems, or if you are in an operation role where you have access to, accounts, those people, those groups, we are segmenting them and they receive a specific, more dedicated training. But this is just part of what we normally try to get a much more rounded metric. We also look at the phishing campaigns, try to test our employee base and see if we can just, what is the level of sophistication of their approach to a phishing email. So we're starting to evolve from there into a much more 360 view, what we call the culture quotient, where we measure everything that an employee of the bank faces in his or her day-to-day when it comes down to cybersecurity. Also awareness of a particular, you're designing a system, how good you are or you're not about designing security or security by design at the very left. We're measuring, of course, your response to the training, your response. So we're taking a much more evolved and sophisticated approach to training you up as an employee in this very, very complex context. No? We're also just starting to make inroads into do that, but also for our ecosystem, third parties, customers. So it's not just about my employees. I think we need to be very conscious of where we operate in the societies where we are. So we do take responsibility also increasingly more for that broader ecosystem.
And so from your perspective, what certifications or qualifications do you believe are important for professionals pursuing a career in cybersecurity within the financial industry?
Of course, we could go down. And by the way, today, if you really want to get trained in cyber, there's never been a better time to do that. Even open training, if you start with more, let's say, vanilla technology training, operating systems, networks, that's a good way to start. And then from there, you can go up. It may sound a little bit heretic, but I don't necessarily think that having the latest certification on a very kind of regulated, framework is necessarily the only option. No, I think you need to complement kind of a very kind of diverse set of skills. You need to know sufficient about networking. You need to know sufficient about operating. You need to know sufficient about databases. You need to know sufficient about monitoring. You need to know a little bit about Python and artificial intelligence. And that is actually giving you the technical substrate to operate. But at the same time, cybersecurity in a financial institution is as much risk management discipline as it is a technology discipline. So training in risk and how to be able to understand and then match risk against your situation is equally important. And so normally, as you keep progressing in your career, you start to see more of a blend of understanding sufficient technology, but having the necessary skills to be able to influence this risk mitigation across the entire company. So being exposed to this senior management, having a very collaborative mindset, and that is not something you necessarily learn, through training. No, it's something you need to be a practitioner of.
You mentioned different technologies everybody these days is talking about AI. So how do financial institutions leverage AI and machine learning to enhance their cybersecurity defenses and respond to the threats?
Well, I think AI, at the end of the day, we look at it from a double perspective, as consumers and as suppliers to it. No? Of course, the pressure is quite high as to how we can deploy AI and LLM for our colleagues. There is multiple ways where we're starting to think about how to apply, even productivity. Our coders, we see that our coders will eventually evolve less and less about coding the last line and more about logic designers, where our copilot and assisted AI assisted programming frameworks will actually plug and then generate the code. So that's an area of investment for us. We, of course, I mentioned before, we do the analysis of the entire regulatory landscape, and then we obtain very expert answers to that. And the problem we have with that, or the challenge we have with that, is while we have been addressing all the potential avenues for data exfiltration in the bank through data leak protection systems at the email level, at the back-to-back connectivity level, at the API level, right now we have a new avenue, especially if you're doing generative AI up there outside in the cloud. So you need to design an entire new set of technologies to protect the bank when we go to use AI and generative AI and LLM for legitimate business purposes. Not just about security, but it's also about potentially exfiltration of the data or reverse engineering of the AI models or poisoning of those models so you don't get a biased answer. So it's a huge new area, and it's a fascinating and super fun area to work on. We're actually very actively dedicated to that. The reverse of it is we also use it for our own defense. As I said before, the bad guys out there are starting to incorporate these technologies very, very fast. The automation, a lot of the attacks we're seeing out there right now they don't have any human assistance. They're basically parameterizations of these automatic and then these robots AI based. They learn, they adapt, and they go and then attack again. So we are starting to use those technologies as well. At the end of the day, cybersecurity is the art of seeing more, like really identifying all the telemetry and all the signals you get, understanding better, that's the correlation element, and responding faster. So as you get to the point where all the basic controls, you kind of see and detect the most usual and kind of understood attack paths. What you really are after is this needle in the haystack, and understanding that, which is basically a very, very kind of a small deviation in a particular pattern, you can only do with this type of new technologies. So that's where we're going, while we follow a slightly more traditional approach about cybersecurity and making sure we have all the controls and detection and elements. Our next challenge is about the identification of that particular anomaly. So for that, we're using these tools, and we're starting to see very, very promising results. By the way, not just in cybersecurity, we are starting to flow over into other areas like financial fraud, like financial crime, KYC, onboarding of customers, and even physical security, insider threat. So it's endless. We're really, really excited about this journey.
So maybe can you share in your experience what are some common misconceptions or challenges that financial institutions face in terms of cybersecurity?
I think the first one is perhaps related to what I said before, and I'm thinking about it to give you a good answer, because often people think that cybersecurity is about kids with hoodies, in the middle of the night fighting, and then you see attacks in a screen going back and forth. And the reality, I don't want to discourage people, but cybersecurity is a very systematic science. It is about, you have tens of thousands of assets, may those be servers or endpoints or databases, and about the controls you deploy. So it's a very systematic, it's about being very detailed, it's about having a very clear methodology, risk management methodology, and articulating and then deciding where the resources are going to be better utilized. So yes, we do the cool hacking thing, and we have really top talent that, they probably conform to what you would imagine as a hacker. But the vast majority of what it is about partnering with our sister organizations in technology or in data, and making sure we shift left, working with the people, working with the users, working with the broader ecosystem about mapping the right level of resources to the right level of control so we achieve our desired risk appetite level. That's what it is, right?
And so to finish up, maybe, so looking ahead, what do you believe will be the most pressing cyber risk concerns for the financial industry?
Well, let me start by saying that we are well prepared. Okay, so people talk about quantum computing, people talk about LLM, Gen AI. This next level of distribution of technology, to me, identity is the next firewall. We need to get to that level of understanding, even at the most atomic level, who can do what. That is something that is still unresolved, right? Whether Anna can access a particular data element of a particular database from this particular location, in this particular context, getting to that level of granularity and then identify where the anomalies are to build a profile. That is a fantastically complex challenge. And I think most banks are working on that because I think we achieved the 80%, but we're getting to that point of the curve where it's almost the area of diminishing returns. While at the same time, the macro environment is getting more and more complicated, highly motivated actors. Of course, yes, people want to hear that I say that I will care about Gen AI and LLM, and we do, and we're working on that. But it's about almost how do we keep head to head with these challenges that we're getting, and the innovation that is coming from outside. Regulatory, as I said, to me, I welcome it. I think it's an stimulant for us. It's keeping us honest, and it's almost kind of setting a level playing field for all banks. And in a very almost selfish way, it allows me to be able to have an assessed, and senior conversation with the management team and the board about what is required for making sure the bank keeps operating.
I think we can finish there. Thank you so much, Alvaro, again.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Thanks a lot.